Season 6 of the Camp Owners podcast launches with a fresh focus on business intelligence, how camps can turn data into smarter decisions and stronger summers, both operationally and in the lives of campers and staff. We're excited to welcome Ryan Rosen from Camp Kinneret, an industry leader known for blending heart and analytics to drive camp excellence. We explore how insights from registration, activity preferences, and staff development can shape the future of our camps. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast.
This is the Camp Owners Podcast from Go Camp Pro, exploring best practices and issues that professionals in the private camp industry face every day. You can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod.
Your staff work late into the night to create perfect camper schedules. Prevent midsummer burnout with Camptivities, the smart scheduling software that saves time, reduces mistakes, and keeps your team energized. Learn more at camptivities.com. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners and industry experts to discuss the big issues in the private camp world. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Suna. I am the executive director and co-owner of Hidden Pines Ranch, located in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Hi, everybody. I'm Howie Grossinger, and I am the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood and Camp Walden, day and overnight camps in Ontario, Canada. Hello, Kelly.
Howie, why does it feel like it's been years and it's really only been, 3-4 months?
It has been. And although we've stayed in touch throughout this time, it's so nice to finally decompress a bit, take a breath. And this is season 6, Kelly. Do you believe it?
No, that means we met at the ACA conference 6.5 years ago or 6 years ago, Howie. That's wild.
I know. It was like before the world shut down, we connected and we've catapulted into our podcast careers in addition to our camp careers.
We are thriving. We are thriving over here. I always feel like after the summer, don't you always feel like we did it? Yay. We're on the other side. So
it's really great and excited for the season to come. And I know we continue to look for the trend of some really solid guests, and we'll get to our amazing guest to kick off season 6. But I also wanted to let our audience know that if you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. And finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners, please feel free to send them a note to listen. We also, and this is apropos given our guest, but a big, big shout out to our podcast sponsor, Camptivities, who is returning for, well over 4 years now as our sponsor of the podcast. And we are grateful to the team at Camptivities who show us so much love and support us in all that we do. Kelly, you want to tell us a little bit about our guest today?
Yeah, well, I was just so funny you should mention our sponsor because that's actually who is our guest today. So Ryan Rosen is our guest. We are super grateful that he is taking the time to be with us. He's a well-respected camp owner. Ryan is so smart. Ryan, I'm not saying that because you are a podcast sponsor. I'm really, truly, you are very, very smart. And I really always enjoy talking with him about the business of camp, and it just makes me think in a more logical, analytical way than I tend to do. So I really value Ryan's friendship and his knowledge and his camp brain. I was going to say his camp knowledge and intellect. So I'm super excited to have him on the show. I think he's super respected in the camp world by other people, but he is here representing Camptivities, but also Camp Kinneret, his camp. And every year he's always trying to improve and help camp leaders enhance. So how is he going to improve and just enlighten us today? What's our topic with Ryan?
Well, first off, we encourage everyone to check out Camptivities when they have a chance. But our topic today is related to all the smart things that I know Ryan is always thinking about. And just recently, there was an article published by Camptivities that I thought would be really awesome to kick off the the planning for 2026 and the kickoff of season 6 of the Camp Owners podcast. And that has to do how to look at your camp through the lens of the concept of business intelligence, which I know Ryan will unpack for us a little more. But Ryan, we want to welcome you to the Camp Owners podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about the data we collect, the things that we think are data, the things that we may not think that are data, but are data, all that good stuff. I don't know if it's is data or are data. I don't know grammatically which is the best way to say it. We'll get that straightened out, I'm sure. But Ryan, as a guest on the podcast, I'd love for you to give not only a brief origin story of you at Camp Kinnaret and your camp life, but just maybe a little bit about the inspiration for this topic. And then we'll just let the conversation go, and we're going to unpack a lot of great things from the concept of business intelligence. So welcome to the Camp Owners podcast.
Well, thank you both. It's nice to be here with you. As always, I always enjoy our conversations, and to be back on the podcast is great. So thrilled to sponsor the podcast. I think there's so much value here for camp owners as we try to push the industry forward and continue to evolve as the market and the environment requires it. So thank you all for having me here. My time started at Kinnaret as a staff member. I attended other camps as a kid and tried sleepaway camp. That wasn't my thing. I was a day camper, loved day camp, loved sleeping in my own bed. And in high school, needed to find a job. Went to work at camp as a volunteer. Was terrible my first year. Was there for the wrong reasons. Was there all about me and not the kids. And thankfully, the camp pointed that out to me and gave me the opportunity to fix that and work on that. And the next summer, was able to come back and was paired with a staff person who was really struggling. And I had the opportunity to go, they're going to have a great summer because of me, or they're going to have a bad summer because of me, because the other counselor wasn't doing anything at that point. So that was really the opportunity, and it really clicked and loved it, and came back year after year, finished college, thought I was done with camp, and then just missed the impact that we can have at camp and didn't feel like I was doing something as fulfilling as what camp offered. And so that brought me back, and have been back now. This was my 28th summer in camp. So yeah.
Wow. Well done. And in terms of your ownership of Camp Kinnaret, it's been how long now? Because you grew up there and went there.
I did not grow up going to Kinnaret.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
my wife did. Britt did. She was a camper here. We met playing adult kickball. And when I told her what I did, she was like, I think I went to camp there. So she had no idea this was going to be a part of her future. But I went to other camps. So we bought it in 2011 and have been running camp since.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me about the article that we're going to dive into in just a second was this quote by Albert Einstein that was embedded into the article. And I'd just like to quote it myself, and maybe you can, elaborate on it. It says, quote, "Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted." How did that quote kind of generate this applicability to what we do for the inspiration for the article?
Yeah, it felt like it really spoke to us about what business intelligence, or BI, as well as key performance indicators, or KPIs, are in camp. And so I feel like often in camp, we look at kind of the macro details, like overall attendance numbers, like camper days, or return rates of staff, or number of returning campers. But the details are really where the real story is. And that's really what this felt like. So an example, are there staff who the summer was more than the sum of the activities that the campers attended during the summer? And so an example, a couple summers ago at Kinnaret, we had a group that their theme, or their group name, was GEPS, which stood for Good Enough Postal Service, which on the surface is like nothing special, right? But the campers were able to come up with so many fun things to do that really permeated their experience. They had logos, and they had a logo and stickers and envelopes and papers for letters and mailboxes around. And they check in with groups about needing things delivered. And they'd always make a joke about, is it good enough, or do you need like extra special handling? The point was that when they went home after summer, that's what they were talking about, all these like inside jokes and other things that happened. And it wasn't about the activities that they attended at camp. And I feel like that's one of those things that you can't really count that in a data point by itself, but that's what was a micro detail of why those kids had such a great time and came back for another season, because they loved that experience. And that's what they were talking about, not the basketball court or the field or arts and crafts in that regard.
I like that quote. I haven't heard that before. So, And I like hearing that from a very data-driven, data-minded man. So that's good. I like that. So why, Ryan, should camp owners see like business intelligence as like a way of thinking and not just a tech tool? So yes, we can't always count everything, but why should camp owners be thinking about business intelligence, as more of a mindset or something that they embrace, especially at this time of year?
Yeah, I think a lot of people. So the movie Moneyball and book Moneyball, which the book is fantastic if you haven't read it. The movie's solid, but the book was fantastic. And that really kind of got me thinking about this years ago of like, what are those data points in camp that we aren't thinking about or we aren't looking at that kind of explain the bigger picture? So business intelligence or BI is really what's really happening in the business and why rather than just collecting the numbers. And I think people often get sidetracked with just the numbers. And the value really comes from the curiosity, critical thinking, and really interpreting the data in context, not from the numbers themselves. So really, it's like a BI mindset means prioritizing facts over assumptions. So oftentimes we'll hear camps go, "Oh, well, I feel like it was a really good summer." Well, that's great. And you can say that like enrollment was up, but like, why was enrollment up? What were the things you did that potentially led to enrollment being up? And understanding that, what were things that counselors specifically did in their groups, or what were things that you added this year or changed this year that could have impacted that? And so it's really looking at the whole customer experience, the operations, all the pieces of it, the marketing, not just the isolated silo of like enrollment is up, but like, did you change how you did advertising this year? Did you change the messaging in your advertising? Did you change where you advertised or what you sponsored or things like that, that ultimately had a piece of potentially the outcome of what you're seeing with enrollment being up? So it's really getting into the nuance of it, the details of it all.
It's really interesting because a lot of our decision making, and I know this, I speak from experience because I've often leaned on this too, is that we lean on our experiences and our gut feeling. We see a number or we see a data point, and then we balance that out between what over years of doing this says, am I being swayed into this direction, or do I know in my gut we should just, keep the road ahead the same as it's always been. And I would imagine that our listeners are hearing this, and there's so much data that we can pull from and trying to sift through what's important, but also recognizing that some of the things we'd never think about as being important data is actually things that can really help us with the data. But we talk a lot about decisions with our head and decisions with our heart, and trying to navigate that. What in your understanding or in your own attempt to apply these principles or this lens, what have you learned about balancing heart and head?
Yeah, it's really the idea of business intelligence is really like framing the questions and then interpreting the patterns and then acting on those insights. So here's an example of how do you use the heart of camp, but also the numbers. So let's say you say a group that had more absences than most of the other groups. So if you're just looking at enrollment numbers, you may miss that point and figure out like, oh, there's this group that seemed to have more absences than some of the other groups. So as you go into the detail of that, why were there more absences in that group? Well, oh, okay. See, the counselor was out sick for half the session. Okay, maybe that was impacted the group. Or maybe a bulk of the campers all came from the same school, and most of the absences were actually from the other campers who didn't go to that school with those kids who are all from that same campus. Or maybe there were more children in that group who had been at camp for many years. Or there was the opposite. There were many kids who hadn't been at camp. And so when you dive into those numbers, now you can go, okay, well, was the counselor not being there, how did that impact their sense of belonging or their connecting with the program or their experience? Or was it that they went to a different school? Well, if it was the school piece, were there any groups that had similar data? If I go back over the last 3 years, were there other situations that were similar to that? And can we correlate experience or return rates or absences as a byproduct of that? And then maybe that's telling us, hey, the kids aren't feeling as connected, or that we weren't breaking up those cliques as much as we thought we were. And so you'll miss that like really nuanced thing because you're just going, well, enrollment's up. And that you're missing the fact that okay, we can train better to that, or we can support more effectively if we look at that nuance, and now we can change the outcome potentially for those families and for those campers' experience.
As a camp owner, you know your operational staff are the heartbeat of your program. They're the ones who would bleed for camp, staying up way too late, night after night, to make sure every camper gets a great schedule. Camptivities gives them their evenings back. Their software builds schedules around your camp's unique rules, saving time, cutting mistakes, and keeping your most dedicated people happy, energized, and ready to give campers the best summer ever. Camptivities does it all for camps. Auto-scheduling for staff, campers, groups, manual adjustments, over 70 reports for rosters and data analysis, tons of customizable settings, and so much more. Schedule smarter at camptivities.com. Don't wait until the new year. Now's the time to find a better way to schedule and save 15% for the first year. Camptivities would love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Let Camptivities help you get away from your desk and back out to camp.
And in an overnight camp context, is there something that comes to mind that might be similar? I mean, staff are always there. Is it related to keeping groups together or mixing them up from year to year? What do you think would be, for those of us in the overnight camp world, could be a like-minded example?
Honestly, it might be the same exact thing that you see return rates from year to year. And some camps like to track kids together, which could be really good for bonding and connection. You go back and see your friends from year to year. But if someone drops out and you add one more child to that group or that cabin, how does that child feel? What kinds of things are you doing? And so seeing return rates from year 1 to year 2, what does that look like? Or did they increase the program that they were on? So in year 1, they did a 2-week program, and the next year they did a 4-week program. So there's different ways to look at the same kind of touch point of understanding the decisions. And that's where surveys come in. I feel like we ask in surveys questions for families, but then we don't necessarily tie that back to the data point of those absences or the data point of the return rates or things like that, to see like, oh, the parents are talking about their daughters didn't get the art class that they wanted or that they expected to get, or they didn't get to be with their friend, or maybe a drop-off point or pickup point before the sleepaway camp started impacted some camps being able to come. So there's just so many. It's not looking at a one data point and making a decision, but it's kind of looking at it in the macro collection of all these points together and how it affects the experience. And that's really interpreting these patterns. And you can't just look at 1 year's worth of data. You have to look at multiple years, because 1 year's data could be an anomaly. Did the economy change? And that affected return rates. You can't control that. That's out of our control, but it can be a part of the story to understand what's going on.
For sure. And then, there's the length of stay, what happens with, first time campers and maybe a small dip their toe into 1 or 2 weeks with you. And how does that translate after a first experience into multiple session registrations, and really digging into, how that's impacting stuff. I'd like to just maybe, Kelly, what are your thoughts on, I just want to maybe dial into the applicability of surveys. I mean, a lot of us do surveys in different ways. Have you experienced, Kelly, with delivering or asking parents to fill out surveys over the course of a summer?
Yeah, we do surveys for campers, staff, and parents. And the end of the summer survey from parents, I think we are classically, my business partner, i.e. my spouse, who is much more thinks like Ryan. I will be transparent, as this is not my gift. So I appreciate that. Don't call Kelly about the data, but Kelly's a work in progress on that. I would say I am classically who Ryan is talking about, of we look through the surveys and we're like, okay, like, why do we think this was? And we use anecdotal, and we do not look at the data like we should. So this is basically for me, but also for others who aren't like that, is I would like to get more into what you're speaking about, Ryan, is like exactly what you said, like prioritizing some facts along with, like, together with that anecdotal or that experience-based knowledge of how can I take those surveys, but then use some data to also guide why I think that's happening, or what we can do with that. So I use them, but I don't use them, and would benefit more from using some more data alongside of them or involved with them. But beyond like what percentage, they recommend Hidden Pines as a camp. Like we do some of those, and like how satisfied are you, and looking at the pie graphs. So we're using data in that way. But beyond looking at the percentages and how, their satisfaction numbers, I wouldn't say we're using the data like we could in this way. What about, are you, Howie?
We don't survey campers specifically, but we do a first time family survey, which has been something we've really dug into. What's your first time experience been like? And that's been something that we do at the end of each session. An area that I'm quite proud of what we've tried to dig into more is staff surveys throughout the summer. Job satisfaction, feelings of recognition and accomplishment. And I think that we've used to this, I think we've, not knowing the term, I think we've used BI as it relates to our staff, not knowing that term before. But I do think we've applied BI more specifically to the staff experience, because coming out of COVID, the campers were there, the staff weren't, and we needed to find ways to make this an attractive place to work every summer. And so I think we've applied a much more focused lens on the data of what staff are saying about support and recognition and compensation and, the areas in which they feel they're getting the greatest job satisfaction. And it might be related to some of the feelings we've had here at our camp around retention. I think I think we've done some good work in that, still more to do. And then the parent surveys continue to be like a work in progress. But outside of that, we're looking at data all the time. But I think with Ryan's examples of just trying to be, where does this data really fit into where we've been and where we're going? So that's my experience with surveys. Ryan, do you do all three buckets as well at Canary?
It's funny. We used to do a ton of parent surveys, and Kelly, I think we did them similar to how you guys did them, where we asked those kind of broad questions, and we didn't feel like we were getting a whole lot of helpful information from them. So, and in some cases we were getting information that was not helpful at all. It was like, oh, it'd be great if you had, a water slide. Well, we're not putting in a water slide because it doesn't fit with our core mission values. So we're not doing that. But so we really pulled back from doing that. And what we've tried to do is switch to a more proactive communication tool of our leadership team reach out to new families during their first week of camp, and really try to open the dialogue then. So we're getting the feedback throughout the course of the summer rather than just getting at the end when candidly we can't do anything about it at that point, versus asking it as we go to get more information. But then we take the details from our leadership team who have written camper notes on all of their campers and their conversations. And now we can take that data and look at that within the bigger context to understand what's going on. And so we've kind of gone away from surveys in some ways because candidly, I'm getting bombarded by surveys virtually every time you go somewhere. You call AT&T and they're like, how was your experience today? Would you recommend this to another business? Well, no, because I just asked you about a product. No, I'm not recommending you based on that. So we didn't want to fall into that trap. And so we've tried to ask better questions as a byproduct.
In terms of I just want to maybe unpack the effort of your leadership team for new families. Is that, would a leadership team member have a finite number of families that is your target to get to in the first week of a new camper's experience? Like how have you kind of developed that over the years?
Yeah, so that's one of those things where having the right tools or software really do come in handy, because you can see like, I know this camper hasn't started yet, so I'm not going to call them yet, versus I'm going to call a family after their first day or second day of camp. And now I can say, hey, I met Johnny at camp today. I'm so-and-so. I'm going to be the one who's supporting the group. We call them the leadership team. Let me explain what that looks like, and really opening that door to talk to them through it. And so you do need the tools to be able to pull the data correctly in the first place. And we can talk more about that, but then making those calls, and they each support a subset of groups. And so their goal is to reach everyone within a week of them starting the program. Their first day is to make that call, to talk to them and make that connection, and then talk to them throughout the course of the summer. So we use different tools during the summer to make sure that those calls are happening, but more so that they're having that contact with those campers too, to be able to give that feedback.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We are, what you had said about the post camp and feedback being helpful. This is not from us, so I don't know who to give their credit to, but we started doing this summer happy camper surveys, and it's just 2 questions. It's one, are you a happy camper? And it's to parents. And then number 2, is there anything that you want our leadership team to know? These are anonymous, but if you want anything to know, put your name in it, or any like shout outs to staff. So we have been doing those midsummer, and that because we're, like you said, Howie, trying to catch things in the summer and trying to fix them versus after. So, but that's incredible, Ryan, that your leadership team is taking the time to do that, to call those new families during the summer in their experience. That's some real-time data.
Yeah,
It is. Yeah. And I know that in the overnight camp world, I mean, a lot of new camper first 3 days, someone from the leadership team is going to do that. I know we do that at our overnight camp. And the fact that, Kinneret's doing it with day campers and that connection too, I really like that. And I think that just, and at the end of the day, it checks off customer service, relationship building. You're not just a registrant. We actually are interested and care about how you feel. And despite the fact that you want me to have a water slide, which we're never going to do, so all that stuff, because you do get all kinds of requests. Well, I think you should do this, but at least you're putting yourself out there to, I think people appreciate that you're putting yourself out there. And to your point, Kelly, most of our first-time family surveys, or all of our first-time families surveys, would encourage people to let us know who they are if they want a phone call back to talk about something specific. I think that invitation to connect personally is always so important in collecting data.
It's really funny. I think we all have experienced the demise of customer service in kind of the classic sense of it. And so we actually get from a lot of parents initially like, why are you calling?
Right.
And like, they can't fathom that we're calling just to like have a human to human conversation of like, hey, this is what my name is. This is what my job is. This is what I'm here for. This is why I do this year after year. Please let us know, because I think the bar is so low, unfortunately, for a lot of childcare organizations, that when you get people who like actually care about your child and actually want to help them grow and learn, like that's unexpected now. And so it has been eye-opening. And candidly, I'll say if they don't recognize the phone number, most parents won't answer anymore. It's a different era from that. So you do leave quite a few voicemails along the way, but you can call back as well. And the family most of the time will check their voicemail. Although there are those people who are like, yeah, I never check that. So a text message or a weekly newsletter or something to remind them of like, hey, we're here for you, also goes a long way.
Agreed.
So we talked about surveys, Ryan, but what are other things that camps maybe already have data, like the registration or first aid logs? Like, what can those things tell camps about what's happening? Like, tell them more when they already have that at their fingertips, and information.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of camps look at new campers or camper return rates. And that's a big one. And we at Kinneret really look at returning families over campers, because we find that sometimes campers age out and they can't come back because they can't be there. But if the family is bringing another child to their program, then to us, that's the family has connected with our philosophy and approach and all those things. And that's an important detail there. So the why, did a camper not continue, is important. And I think camps often look at the broad sense of what retention numbers are without considering that some kids age out of the program. Another is like, why has enrollment in week 3 been higher in each of the past few summers? Why are fewer fourth to sixth grade girls signing up? There's ways to break up the data a little bit more to understand it. Why has a certain group had more absences than others? Or if you're a day camp and you do transportation, we've had several families switch from a specific bus route to driving their child to camp over the course of the session or the summer. Why is that? And that could be one that tells you something's going on that bus, that you're not on the bus, so you can't see it. And so you can start asking more questions when you start to notice those things. And is that a trend over the last 3 years, or is that unique to this 1 year? Okay, well, what changed on the bus this year? Did you change where the stop is? Maybe you need to add a stop. Maybe you need to relocate where that stop is. Maybe there's something unsafe going on in that neighborhood and you have to relocate it. So there's different things that you can find out, because once you see that those families changed from the pickup, you can reach out to those families. Hey, I noticed that you made that change, and ask a few more questions to understand. And that's where I think that additional surveying comes back really beneficial.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, I think the returning families point's a good one too, because things change from year to year, but if the family's with you, they're with you. And I think that's the ultimate, for lack of a better term, that's the compliment you want, is that they continue to trust you to keep and not wholesale changes and not returning it all. I like that one a lot. We talked a little bit about, I think in your last, response, you talked about some things that we can ignore or not, take notice of. In terms of your bus example was a good one. Are there other things that, we should be taking notice of that maybe, as we look at through our typical lens that, we should broaden that a little bit? Does anything else come to mind?
I think on the staffing side, there's some changes that come into play there. I think oftentimes camps will qualify staff as like they're all stars, and they don't really dive into what that means or what those traits are, or how did they find you, or did you advertise differently on that website that a lot of those all stars came from? How did they find you? And they just go, oh, these people were great. Well, let's use some business intelligence and some KPIs to really dive into why were they all stars? How did they find you? How can I find more of them? And things like, are there things that they were looking for? Are there websites that you're advertising for staff on that draw a certain crowd or have certain characteristics that you really value in your program? And are you highlighting those in that process? But that comes from looking at just not staff retention, but the quality of the staff that you're keeping from year to year. And then how do you try to add more of those people? Now, sometimes you'll get some staff who are awesome, but because of different things within their industry, they have a shorter run at camp. They can't be there for 4, 5, 6 years. They can maybe be there for 1 or 2 summers. And some camps would go, I'd rather have someone for 3 or 4 summers. And other camps will go, no, I'm okay with having an all-star for 1 or 2 years, but I just need to get more all-stars more regularly. And so you have to figure out what those details are, those traits that you want, and how do you find more of those people who have those traits?
Yeah, I really like that. Kelly, what's your thought on that? That's really cool.
No, I like the difference between where am I getting a lot of staff from versus where am I getting my really fantastic staff from. Like that could be the same, but it can also be very, very different. So I really like that lens for looking at staff retention. I'm curious, like what's been on my mind too, Ryan, and I think one of the greatest thing about podcasts and talking to other camp people is, and something that I think listeners and just camp people in general benefit the most from, is like, give me some real tangible like takeaways, or like if Ryan Rosen were to say like, these are the top 5 or top 10 or top things, like those key performance indicators that camp should be looking at right now, because this is the time, right? Like, what are the most useful things that people listening to this could go and do after this, or start to look into, or, if you were going to do, and they're not doing, let's say they're not doing much of it. What are the top 5 things or top couple of things, I guess, measurements that you think would be most useful for summer camps to be doing right now or soon?
So I think the first one is being very clear on what your organization's mission is. And I think people miss that sometimes, is that they are making decisions individually and not looking at the big picture. And so first is really having that, knowing what that mission is and making sure that everything you're doing, all the measurable goals are to sustain that mission. I think that's an important piece of it. So a lot of camps will say, I want to increase enrollment from year to year. That's a really super common one, right? But it's too vague. So a better goal would be increase retention from year 1 to year 2 by 50% and increase year 1 enrollment by 25%. So now that's your goal. So now we can build a strategic plan about how we're going to do that. And we can use some of the data that we've collected to look at where are the ways that we can increase that retention from year 1 to year 2. So what are some of the drop-offs that are happening? That's where some of the survey questions can help us understand that drop-off as well. It's really hard to call a family who didn't come back for year 2 and be like, hey, this is Howie from Camp Robin Hood. I noticed that you guys attended 2 summers ago, but didn't come back this summer. I'd love to understand more of why that choice was made and get into that. It's a really awkward conversation, of course, but it could be really valuable. And that families walking away going, wow, that was really thoughtful of them to take the time to understand that. But that's really helping your mission because you're understanding the decision that they made more. And so I think being really specific about what your goal is also a super important piece of this puzzle as well. And when you come up with what the areas are that your camp is, the changes you want to make for the coming year, really dive into, okay, how would we know if we're doing this? How would we know if we've accomplished this? And that's the other piece of it. I think oftentimes camps have these lofty goals, but they don't break it into ways that they can actually see that they're doing it because they're so broad. So if I go back to my attendance example where you have more kids who are absent from there, okay, what are the things we're going to change during orientation? And what are the things we're going to change week to week with check-ins with the leadership team or with those staff to see how those kids are doing? So during the course of the session, we're able to see if those kids are really connecting with their peers and their counselor. And now next summer we can look back and go, okay, we see a turnaround now. We saw that those groups that did have those clusters from one school with a few outliers, those outliers attended significantly more this year. Okay, now we have that specific goal that we can see how we did in that area.
If we were to switch our attention to this lens of business intelligence to the programs we offer, maybe we could just jump into a little bit about, how do you know that, what changes you need to make to your archery program, or your camp-wide programs, depending on what you create as sort of camp-wide events and things like that. And I mean, a lot of that comes from camper and staff feedback, but we also have ways of, looking at it from that perspective. I mean, in some cases, these things take an investment to run these programs, and perhaps there's an expense, element to it that you have to assign. So how does BI apply to some of those programmatic sort of goals or KPIs on whether it's doing what we thought it would be doing for our camp experience or not? Have you had experience having to look at your programs through this lens as well?
Yeah, and I think that's a piece of that mission that's really important, Howie, to think about is what do you want the kids taking with them when they leave at the end of the summer? And so sometimes a program like archery is a tool to use to help accomplish that mission. And sometimes getting better at archery is the mission. And both those things can be true. And so you have to be clear on what's important to you and for your program's growth over time. So if your goal is that archery is something that they're getting better at it, well, how are the kids measuring if there's improvement? How are you measuring if there's improvement? What does that look like from is there an evaluation? Are they receiving some kind of reward or award for accomplishing something at the archery range? Are kids talking to each other about it when you talk to families or your leadership team talk to families? Is archery coming up as a question or a conversation point? Is it something kids are going home and talking about? If archery is a key part of your program and none of the kids are talking about it when they get home, that tells you something. And you go, okay, well, why not? And you could ask that question. Hey, have your kids talked about archery at all? Oh yeah, they enjoy it. Okay, what part do they like about it? And so that may be where camper surveys come into more handy to be able to ask those questions of them as well, to understand what they like or don't like about archery. So that's where the heart, Kelly, I think that you are coming from is really valuable, because you're understanding how they're feeling about it. And then you can walk that back and go, okay, we're spending X amount of dollars on equipment, but they're feeling like it's really hard to get a bullseye, and I'm feeling really disheartened when I'm not getting a bullseye. Okay, well, that feels like it's a training component that we can help educate our staff more effectively how to frame that and how to coach that in the moment when they're struggling, and it's less about the physical equipment at the archery range. Or it could be that I'm getting a lot of bullseyes, but once I get a bullseye, I'm kind of done and I want to move on. Well, that sounds like you need additional challenges. Maybe you need a different type of course. Maybe you need to evolve the range over the course of the session, because they feel like they're done with the program sooner than the session isn't over yet. So there's different ways to think about it. And if your goal is that I want my kids to be better problem solvers and overcome hard things and not give up on things, then I don't really care if they mention archery, because now I want to see if they're able to do that. And I'm surveying and asking questions and looking for, are they better at sticking with things when they're hard versus giving up? Because most kids don't get a bullseye on the first shot. It takes them some time. Well, do those kids want to leave? Like when you hand that same child a lanyard, or in how we speak, a boondoggle. And did I get that right? Yeah, a boondoggle. Yeah.
Did Canadian is boondoggle, not lanyard.
So if I give them a lanyard and that same child's handing it back to me within 30 seconds going, it's broken, then I need to work on how to connect the dots between the challenge and struggle with the lanyard with archery, that they didn't get that bullseye on the first day, in the first try, but they stuck with it, and why. And so it gives you different points of how to have those conversations, but you have to know your mission first. You have to know what your outcome is before you can really focus on these other details.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, and that again, in the vast expanse of camp's offerings, specialty camps, sports specific camps, traditional camps, how we communicate that to our clients, sets us up for sort of the feedback we're going to get and the data that we will ultimately, be able to assess based on what we're promising or selling or engaging in terms of our program development and what the client themselves feel they're getting full value for. So I think that it goes back to that heart and head, right? It's like mission versus, the business side of it, and everything has to be in sync for sure. But now let's move to this. I'm someone who's listening to this podcast. I like this concept of business intelligence. I've got like 4 or 5 pieces of data that me myself as the owner, operator, executive of my camp want to now bring to my core 5 or 6 people. And I want to say, hey friends, I'm looking at this and I see it from, talk to me a little bit about someone who wants to introduce, diving into this a little more over the next few months as we start gearing up. People are in different schedules of enrollment, but, and program planning. Do you have any advice how someone may bring this up with their core team as an exercise?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of people think about surveys as kind of a static deliverable, like, oh, that's just something we have to do. And BI mindset or business intelligence mindset is really about constantly monitoring, questioning, and refining those business activities. So as you're introducing it to your team and understanding it's that we want to understand the whole picture, how it all goes together. And you mentioned the advertising is the way we're communicating what our program is. Does it fit with what we're actually delivering? And that's not something that's just in the data unless you start to put all these pieces together. So as you're talking to your team and thinking about decisions for next summer, it's really looking at the whole experience from the first time the parent reaches out and inquires or looks into your program to their last day of the program. All of the things that they interact with along the way are all a piece of that understanding your what your product is. It's not just the time that they're at your camp, because if you're promoting X but you're delivering Y, they're going to be unhappy because they expected something totally different. And so now in the data, you just see that your return rate's low, but that's fixable because you can go, oh, what we said we were going to do is so different than what we actually delivered. Hey, what if we change how we're talking about it and how we're explaining the program? Or we have to change the program to match what we're saying we're going to do, and we have to do that better job of that. And now all of a sudden return rates increase. But if you're not looking at those nuances, you can miss that that's where the breakdown is happening because you're not understanding that that's what's happening. So I think talking with your team is really about helping them to understand that this is not, fancy data tools and software that you have to get like Tableau to have graphs, although graphs are great, but like you don't need fancy software to do this. It's really understanding the experience from start to finish for your campers and for their families. And if it's meeting the mission and the goal of what you set out at the beginning. So helping your staff and your team understand that, and then going back and taking the data to help understand what we're seeing and what's happening and go, okay, we're seeing this drop off in campers when they're kind of on the outskirts of the friend group, or a lot of the kids have returned year after year in the same cabin and these newbies are struggling to connect. Great. That's something that's a data point, but it's something we can easily go into training and change how we go about it and support throughout the summer to make sure they're feeling connected and bonded. And that could be a camper survey midway through the session to understand where they're coming from. And the survey could be a questions with the staff person is asking the campers as they're walking from point A to point B. It doesn't have to be a formal piece of paper. It could be just ask them a question when they're done with their game at handball, like, hey, who have you gotten to know this summer in our group? Who do you go to school with? And you can ask these questions that they go, oh, they're not really playing with anyone new. They're playing with the same kids from school they always play with. Okay, I need to help them connect with John. Now the question is, how do I do that? Most camp professionals, I feel like, are like, great, now I'm ready to go because I know what to do now. But it's how do I ask that question before to understand that's a problem in the first place?
I like that idea of being able to, collect that real time. Like, I think what I like about what you said is that it doesn't have to be so complicated. And I think people think, like you said, as a paper, a survey, a computer, like it can be that more conversational data that you're collecting midsummer from staff to camper. It doesn't have to always be so formal and, like you said, a data, a number, a numerical value put on it. It really can be that looking to staff and being focused on what the mission is and being able to gather that in real time versus, after. So I like that a lot.
It's really, the idea is really turning hindsight into foresight. So not just asking what happened, but what could we do differently this time to potentially have a different outcome? And we won't know until we get to the end of it, but we're seeing these kind of trends and patterns and go, there's something here. Let's see if we can affect change here that we might see a change for next year. And that's why having multiple years of data points is super, super important, because otherwise you could just go the wrong way very quickly without seeing patterns or trends. And that's the difference between just looking at the data and really looking at BI and really looking at the scope of the whole piece.
And sometimes I think what can happen also is I notice is sometimes feedback or information from staff or parents, you can get one negative comment or one, and then you're like, oh, we got to change everything versus like,
100%.
Really, I mean, I think that can happen a lot. Like a staff
that does happen a lot.
It happens a lot.
For
like,
all of
oh my
us.
gosh, this kid had a terrible experience. Well, this is everybody's experience. We have to totally change the program. Or a staff mentions this, and then we're like, well, we got to get rid of that. But then it's like, no, we need to actually dive into, like, is this more than one person's experience? What led into this? Like, I think that can so easily happen with camp. And it's not to say like invalidating that person's response, but it really is like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Does it actually need the grease, or like what's the squeaking about? So I just noticed that's a trap that we've done it in past years. We fall into it, but it's really like, I think this helps to guide camps to get to the why. And like you said, the foresight versus like, oh, it's not working, get rid of it.
We are by nature fixers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we are. We are fixers.
100%.
As camp pros, we want everyone to walk away. We want the grandparent of the child that comes to camp to be super happy with us. Yet we're not selling a widget, and we're not selling a pizza. We're selling an experience. And when someone gives us some feedback that makes our stomachs turn a little bit, we go into that mode. It is, I think it's just what we do. And a lot of the reason why we're so good at what we do is because of that, knowing when to, delineate what is a real issue versus this is kind of the hardest thing. I know that, I think we all go through this, Ryan. Like when you started saying that, Kelly, just for our audience, like Ryan and I are like smiling because it's like guilty as charged. Our group does that. Yeah.
Whenever you get that one call of like the parent who has a frustrated child or a frustrated experience, you're just like, oh, like it affects you because you want every child to walk away with a great experience. And so it's easy to do that. And I think the piece of business intelligence that's really important is to dive deeper into that experience. Well, when the parent's sharing all that with you, it's like, yes, thank you for telling me. And I need to ask 5 or 6 more questions now to understand this a little bit more. Tell me more about what you were expecting versus what the experience has been like. And the parent may tell you something, you're like, never heard of that before. That's interesting. Do you remember where you saw that information or what led you to feel that way about that or expect that? And then you're diving deeper into it to really understand it. And that can help you go, oh, this is an anomaly. That parent didn't read. They didn't read anything that we posted. They didn't read any of our FAQ. They didn't watch the video. They didn't talk to anybody. Like they just saw that we were taking kids and signed their child up. We had that this summer where a parent told us their child's not an outdoorsy kid. And I'm like, well, our tour talks about being outdoors. Our website talks about our activities are listed there. Like we have lots of touch points where we explain what our program is. At no point do we try to tell you that it's an indoor program. So like, is that really our fault? Is that something we could do differently? Or is that just a parent who didn't look into the program correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just the classic, like my kid's not they're not making any friends. So you can go and talk to those counselors like, hey, we really need to facilitate some more connections. But you talk to the parent and they're like, oh, well, they had some trouble at school. Or I heard like they use their brother as a safety blanket and they're not in the same group. So it's like that deeper dive. But I just think it's such an interesting thing because as camp pros, like that duality of like, we really are dependent on to be good at making decisions and problem solving, like you said, fixing, like like, but then we really have to be also stepping back and taking a pause to get more of that information before, making change or going ahead with something.
And we are held to a very high standard by parents, an extremely high standard. And in some cases, there's not a lot of wiggle room with some people, that you talk to. But I think Ryan's advice about, just not taking that at face value, but digging into exploring that. And then I've often felt, and I know that, my wife Sari's often felt, is that those people who initially push back, if you can go through that exercise, they become your biggest fans, right? We have in our industry, we have countless examples of the squeaky wheels, who you've turned around, who are now raving fans because you've been able to navigate their frustration or their unrealistic expectation and dial them back. And that often can help you not feel that you have to make wholesale changes on how you do things or deliver the experience because you've taken the time to just learn more, which is essentially, I think, what we're all sort of suggesting as a strategy for this.
Yeah, and I think Kelly, your previous question was about how do you introduce this to your team. I think that's a piece of it too. Is like when you can back it up with like the details or the data. I think as you're talking to your staff, I think it helps them go, okay, that makes sense why we're trying this, or I see that there's a gap there too that we need to address. And so I think as people are as you know what your values are and you want to be a values-driven program, often it can be tricky to bring data into that space, but it's a space specifically that's about community and growth and fun. But the good news is that being data informed doesn't mean being data obsessed. And that's where I think people really struggle is they focus and rely too much on the data and forget that this is helping us to strengthen our values and our mission, not the other way around. It's not driving our mission. That's why I said you have to know what you're trying to achieve first is really important. So if you start with your camp's core values, and let's say friendship is one of those, the question you should be asking is on the post-camp surveys or talking to campers is how many friends did you make this summer? Right. And I know a lot of camps don't ask that question, but yet they list that as a core value of what they want kids to experience. So like it's asking the right questions that help support that mission and those core values. So defining your values as measurable outcomes is really important. And then using the data to support, not replace the stories. So the numbers don't capture the full heart of camp, but they should be backing up the stories you already tell. So 95% of our campers tried something new this summer, like Ella, who learned archery for the first time. So you're still focus on that mission, but you're helping to use data to support that for families, and families go, oh, that's awesome. And then it's also focusing on those leading indicators of the experience as well. So instead of just tracking the financials, enrollment, and revenue, you want to track experience-based metrics like returning campers are satisfied and connected, parent feedback on safety and communication, staff satisfaction and return rates, participation rates in community traditions, things, if you have special days, a week of color wars or things like that, like do you see an increase in enrollment during those or not? And things that may have been historically things that were really valued, maybe times have changed and they're not as valuable as they once were. So that's where you're looking at the data and tying it to the story you're telling and not getting caught up in the data.
I like that, Ryan, a lot because I think it speaks to camps that could be on one side or the other, right? Of like you said, like very data, like numbers are down, we got to get them up. And then maybe some that aren't looking at their numbers really at all. I think it is a nice balance of a reason to use both, like to marry both of those, but centered on like really, like you said, if friendship's important, are you asking about friendship? Did they make friends? So I really like it. I think it speaks to both sides of that, or both perspectives.
Yeah, and
Great.
it's just being super intentional, right? I mean, in a lot of those things, and it is the beginning of season 6, so we have to kick it off by talking about Michael Brandwein at some point. So because we'll mention him a few times during the season, but I think that how does your mission and what are you doing specifically to feel good about delivering on the mission, and what's the data that can demonstrate to you that you've done it. So I think it's both. You can see it on the smiles and the cheers, but you can also see it and reinforced by other measures as well. Don't rely on one more than the other to any great extent, but in combination, it gives you a really good indication of if you're delivering on what you say you're going to deliver. And also, are you improving in the areas that you've targeted the areas you want to improve on, which is something that I know as camp people, we're always, trying to raise the bar. So I think that those are really great points for all of us to take away from this conversation. And I know for sure, Ryan, we're going to be putting the link to the article in the show notes for sure,
Great.
so people can have a look, Kelly. And I think that it's a really good jumping off point for conversations we're going to have over the course of, this season on the show.
Yeah, and good timing for the bandwidth of our brains of what,
Right.
It's a really good time to be able to focus on that as we start to look into 26. So fantastic. Thank you, Ryan, for that solid information.
Absolutely. I would say the last piece I would say for camps is use data as a mirror, not the master. It's a tool to help leaders see whether they're living up to what matters most and where they can grow. It shouldn't be driving the decisions we're making.
I like that. Mirror, not master. That could be, look at your own Ryan Rosen quote, specialty. I love it. All right, Ryan.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Put on t-shirt. I mean, I won't call you Albert Einstein. It's, but you're on your way. You're on. I feel it. You're our own in the camp world. All right, Ryan, we always have to end with rapid fire camp questions. So are you ready for
I'm ready. I don't know what you're going to ask me, so now I'm curious, but go for it.
Well, good. I'm getting you on the spot. All right. Number one, favorite camp meal, or like what is your go-to day camp lunch that you pack for yourself?
Candidly, I'm a parent of two, and I pack their lunches and my wife's, who also works in camp. So I'm packing 4 lunches every morning before I get to the office. So whatever is the easiest, I do. So we have peanut butter and jelly is a popular one for us.
Grape or strawberry or raspberry? What's the flavor?
Definitely strawberry. The kids do not care for grape. And they also like smooth peanut butter, not crunchy. And they also like the crust off their bread, but that takes a long time. So I found if I cut it in at angles, they can still get, without having to cut off the crust, they can still eat the sandwich. So
Whoa.
Dang.
A lot of problem solving there with that. Make it life easier.
Wow.
Hello. Yeah.
Data-driven decisions, right? Who has time for cutting the crust off, but they want the soft part. So how can I get to the soft part easier?
Wow. Dad of the year and spouse of the year packing Britt's lunch. Wow, Britt.
If only.
Wow.
Lucky.
All right. If you could lead any program at your camp or at any camp, like program area, what would you lead, Ryan?
Anything that has to do with using our imaginations and being creative, and not, to me, it's what I love the most to do, is just create and go with it. So yeah.
That's not what I expected from you.
Yeah? What did you expect?
Just again, being like a data guy and like just the way you're so analytical and good, I would think it'd be something more like very rules oriented, like archery, or like I that's totally what I expected you to say. I did not expect that. So I love it. Thanks for surprising me.
But I like taking those programs like swimming, which is aquatics, is a passion for mine, and it's very rules driven. But like, how do you make it more than any other pool anywhere else? Because swimming is swimming. It's not unique in any way. My pool is no different than your pool. We don't have boondoggles like, Howie does, but I'm trying to work that as many times as possible.
We noticed.
Just go for it.
But for swimming, I think it's a way, like, how do you make the pool more fun? How do you add creativity to it to make it more than just the sum of water and you're in a bathing suit swimming around?
I like it. Okay. S'mores, burnt or golden brown?
Oh, definitely golden brown.
Okay.
Who wants burnt?
I don't know. People like
I do.
Do
you like burnt? Wow.
I do.
Who knew? Okay. As a camper, do you think you were like missing home or like a sayonara parents? How did you feel?
I was probably a little bit of both, but more to the like, all right, I'm out. I'm going to have fun here. But definitely some hesitance on the first day getting on the bus without knowing anyone. And it's scary. Where am I going to sit?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
As a camp pro, do you prefer to be like in the office doing the logistical things, or do you like to be out in the action?
This is a trick question you're asking me. So during the summer, I know my job is to be outside and being that vocal person, but I really enjoy being in the office doing the things that need to get done.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate your honesty. Last question. Favorite camp song? What is it?
The one I sing every year is Way Up in the Sky. That's my favorite. The little bird flies way down in the nest, the little bird rests, because it's active. You can be silly with it. It gets people moving, and you can use silly voices with it. And I just think you can do a lot with it.
Nice.
Great. Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for not insight on every nook and cranny of Ryan Rosen's persona. I love it. This is a great kickoff to season 6. Thank you for this, Ryan. If people want to connect with you, aside from being a sponsor, and hopefully people check out Camptivities, but if they want to tap into Ryan, the Camp Pro, how might someone connect with you over the course of the year?
They can always email me, ryan@camptivities.com. That's an easy way to get to me. Canarit is a little harder to spell, so you can also do ryan@campcanarit.com. Both of those go to the same place, so happy to do that. But yeah, would love to connect with people.
Amazing. Kelly, people want to connect with Kelly Suna before she makes another run of multiple conferences as a workshop leader. Is that happening? Maybe? Yes?
I don't know, Howie. We have to stay tuned, TBD.
Okay. TBD.
My email at camp, my official email is kelly@hiddenpinesranch.com. Otherwise, my Instagram is at KJShuna3, or our camp one is at HPR_Insta. What about you, Howie?
Well, please check us out on Instagram at Camp Robin Hood, and you can check the stuff I'm up to at Howie Grossinger on Instagram, and always reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca is the way to get a hold of me. I want to thank our sponsor, Camptivities, as always being there for us. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff from our show. And there are so many other amazing Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. Check them out. We hope you enjoyed this. Ryan, thank you so much. Look forward to staying connected all year long. Kelly, we're back. Maybe better than ever, but who knows? I mean, maybe we'll put out a survey and see what people think. Who knows? But we want to thank everyone for listening and can't wait to bring you the next episode of the Camp Owners Podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Camp Owners Podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review on Apple Music or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, you can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. The Camp Owners Podcast is part of the Go Camp Pro Podcast Network. Find a podcast for camp pros of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Hey, Camp Pros. We love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, if you've gotten even one good idea from a Go Camp Pro podcast, a masterclass, from the Summer Camp Pros group on Facebook, at a conference, or wherever else, we ask that you give credit where credit is due. That way, we can encourage camp pros to keep freely sharing their brilliant ideas and make the camp industry better. Thanks very much.